And what you should see in the top left-hand side of your screen is a little red button that says recording. So feel free, if you don't want your face featured or your words recorded, to comment in the chat and or the Q&A. Throughout this session, we plan, and with a smaller group, it's great. We're going to allow you to unmute yourself if you have a question to ask. We welcome your questions at any and all times, or you can put a question in the chat line. A bit like what we just asked you to do in commenting on yes or no, would you mind being recorded? There'll be set times when we ask you to comment in the yes or no, so we can get a gauge of how involved otherwise you have been. And if you have a longer question, you can pose it in the Q&A, and we'll do one of two things. We'll answer online, or we'll answer, oh, excuse me, David, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, so you have any questions, there are different ways that you can do it. You can raise your hand and we can unmute you. We can put the question on the chat. And also there is a function on the webinar format called Q&A that you can pose the question there and we can answer it as well. Depends of the question that we will ask you on some different areas during the presentation. We might ask you to better put your answers on the chat or just unmute yourself. So right now you are all able to unmute yourself. Thank you so much for keeping you muted just for the background noise, like Eliana mentioned it on the chat. Thank you so much. But feel free when we say to you, you're welcome to mute and ask us questions, to mute yourself, and yeah, directly ask whatever you want. But if you prefer, like Maggie said, you can pop your question on the chat or the Q&A function, and we will answer it as quickly as possible. If you have other questions related to other things of the campaign that it's not what we are at the time talking, feel free to ask them at the end of the call. For example, you might have a question, where do I get resources from? So we can answer that. We can provide you the website and everything, and other questions that might not be what we are at the moment talking, but it pops out in your mind. Put them on the chat and we can answer later when we finish the presentation or in other moment in the presentation. Maggie?
I'm good.
Mike?
I think I'm good to go. So we're going to share the screen of the PowerPoint that's available on our resource hub.
I'm going to share that.
It's a resource that you can draw on as well, can access and download, and it's got lots of talking points in the notes section. And you can see some of those notes just then, but here we go. So this year's Freedom Challenge is the theme of shouting out for climate justice. And if we can we move on to the next slide, David, or can I do that myself?
I can do it, yeah.
Okay. So I think, and to the next slide, actually. Let's go to the next slide.
There we go.
And the next slide.
There we go.
Oh, the thing I want to talk to you guys about is not the slides, but who we are. But Freedom Challenge, actually, and I'm the only one on this call who has been part of every single other Freedom Challenge, and we've had Freedom Challenges since 2006. And our first Freedom Challenge was Human Rights Defenders are the Real Superheroes. And along the way, we have focused on an array of issues because that's what Freedom Challenge does. It was aimed to take on the might of World Vision at the time, but to add a campaigning focus that we didn't see in the then World Vision, which is all about fundraising. Ours is very much priority focus is on campaigning. So this is our annual youth-led event, and it happens in and around August the 12th, which is International Youth Day. And we aim to ensure that along the way, youth who participate in this event handle a real-life campaign where we think they are best suited to create change on that issue. So, and that you will build leadership skills, you will learn how to liaise with decision makers, to speak to media, to host events, everything along the way. That's what the aim of Freedom Challenge is. Next slide, thanks, David. And it's very much focused on our youth network, but it can go wider. Our aim was always to make it beyond our youth network. And our youth network is many of the people here. You've operated at secondary schools. So we are in about 70 secondary schools nationwide, four university groups across New Zealand. And those groups can have as few as 8 members, sometimes even smaller, or 300 plus members. So they will go from in fact, 300 plus members at Westlake Girls, which is our largest school group, through to 3 members down in Otago Girls. But they all do exactly the same thing. They carry out events, they raise human rights concerns, they host events, and we encourage our youth to participate in youth conferences, workshops like this one, attend our annual hui, which we're hosting tomorrow night. But also this network is made up of about 2,500 youth advocates. So a youth advocate is anybody aged under the age of 25 and who wants to contribute their time and expertise to Amnesty. That's what a youth advocate is. So we are encouraging also our individual members to take action with us on climate justice. So if we go to the next slide, thanks, David. I've touched a bit on this already, but we are looking to develop youth leadership skills. And by the time our Amnesty members leave school groups, they tend to be some of the most experienced campaigners in New Zealand already. And I can't overstate that enough. So the skills you learn at the Amnesty group will stand you in good stead as you walk into life in a university or with the jobs that you take or the NGOs that you support, whether that's Amnesty International or not. The skills here are going to be fantastic for the future. We also want, Freedom Challenge is the one time that we give youth more tools and resources to take action. I'm going to talk about those later in the session. We put you in front of decision makers wherever we can. That's part of that advocacy. The reason being, sometimes Amnesty International Amnesty International, the organisation, can't get in front of MPs because they know what we're going to say, because we've already had that conversation with them before, but we really need to remake the point. But they can't say no to people who are in their constituency or who are youth particularly. They like getting before youth and talking to them. So when you ask an MP to visit your school, you are more likely to have success with him or her than we would as Amnesty International. So we want to make sure that you realise your power and draw on it. And for us, the media coverage, and I'm a journalist by profession, but media coverage, what is it? Basically, it's the best form of unpaid advertising that we could get. And if we can get our youth advocates on the front page of their local rags or in social media or the New Zealand Herald or other TVNZ, whatever, that's really powerful for us. But also teachers, schools really love that kind of thing as well. And it supports, they love seeing their kids presented in a great way in media, and we do too. So it's a win-win for all of us. And then Freedom Challenge also encourages you to raise funds for our human rights work. So throughout Amnesty International's engagement, we never ask our youth for money. that's youth under the age of 18. We will not ask for money. But Freedom Challenge, we provide the resources that allow you to ask for donations in return for handing them out, whether they're badges or brochures or whatever. That's when we ask you to raise funds for human rights, and that's this event. And we'll move on to the next slide. Thanks, David.
Okay.
Before we hand on, can I just check with, one thing I forgot to do was to ask how many of you have been involved in Freedom Challenge already? And I think, could you just put either yes or no in the chat?
Okay. We have Olivia and Arusa that say they have been involved.
Right. And Eliana, how did you avoid Freedom Challenge when you were at Onehunga? That seems... How did that happen, darling? Anyway, so there's already a strong knowledge. Maybe I was too young. Okay, babe, maybe you were. Okay, I think I'm going to hand over to David at this point.
Thank you, Maggie. So yes, this year's theme is shutting out for climate justice, because climate justice is one of the most significant threats to our life right now and probably in the future, unfortunately. And this is something that we see that our youth can take lead on and contribute with the movement of climate justice in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So just wanted to check with you. Could you please put on the chat if you have been involved in any school strike for climate marches or events? Just say yes or no, just to have a sense of how many you have been involved.
Okay. Okay, 2 no's. Yes, indeed,
Yep,
Eliana.
You're right, Eliana. We're going to talk about the 4th of September event that is going to be organized by School Strike for Climate and other climate organizations involved with them, and encouraging you guys to attend the events. So thank you for your answers. And also, just to check the Zoom functions and play a bit around with them, could you please raise your hand if you have attended our Humanity Appeal webinar related to climate justice panel that we had a couple of months ago. We hosted an online webinar, panel discussion with 3 amazing environmental human rights defenders. So one was Sophie from School Strike for Climate, Brianna from 350 Climate Warriors, and then we also had India Logan from Te Arafatu. Can you please raise your hand for a second? Do you see the function? If you don't see the function, you can put on the chat yes or no. Okay. No worries. If you didn't attend this, we are going to provide in the resources a link to the recording of the panel, and you're going to be able to watch it. Or if you want to watch it again because you missed a part of it, you're welcome. I see that Eliana attended. Thank you so much for attending. I hope you enjoyed the discussion that they had. So I'm going to move on the presentation. So we need to know how we end up in this mess. So unfortunately, rich countries have historically been responsible for climate disruption. Since the Industrial Revolution, their development has been based on the use of non-renewable and polluting energy resources. And their global greenhouse gas emissions have increased by 70% since 1970. The rich countries therefore have a climate debt for countries, and climate justice requires them to reduce their emissions to enable disadvantaged countries to develop and meet their basic needs. And also, the 100 largest fossil fuel corporations generate around 71% of the world's greenhouse gases. So with these stats, we can see that the largest fossil fuel corporations have a big part on the climate change, climate change and consequences. So they are highly contributing on the effects of climate change being accelerated. We understand that they need to be held accountable. Amnesty International is working on this as well with other organizations. So also, every half degree or even less of global warming counts. So we see that by 2019, the concentrations of the three main greenhouse gases have reached new heights. And at the end of 2015 in Paris, the international community set the objective of remaining below or no more than 1.5 degrees of global warming compared to the pre-industrial era. So keeping global warming as low as possible, but definitely below 1.5 degrees, it will help to protect 10 million people from risks related to the sea levels, twice New Zealand's population. We're currently 5 million, so imagine the double of New Zealand population. Listen, the risk of up to several hundred million people facing poverty and other climate-related risks by 2050, and reduce the risk of inadequate access to water by 50% of the world's population. So what this translates to if we are not trying to reduce the CO2 emissions. So it's gonna have an impact of our life. So while I'm here talking about the effects of climate change, can you put on the chat if you have ever experienced any of these effects in your community? You have ever experienced more intense heat wave, prolonged droughts, more wildfires in your communities. So just to say that, for example, I'm originally from Spain, and I remember when I was a kid, we didn't have so long summers. You can see, well, then you have more chances to go to the beach. And I will say maybe yes, but the high temperatures make people not wanting to even leave the house. Not just because we'll get probably burned and really dry and having health issues, but also because it affects our day-to-day life. And it happens as well with other climate issues that we have faced in the past and we are continuing facing. The rising sea levels is something that is going to happen soon, that like what's happening in Kiribati as well, but in New Zealand we are seeing that as well. And what I was talking about in Spain, we currently have a semi-desert in the center of Spain, and year by year my family is saying to me that it's getting bigger and bigger and have an impact on farming. And we are a country that we export a lot of farming products around Europe and around the world. And it really affects our economy and as well our people losing their jobs, not being able to farm anymore. Or also the heat waves that I mentioned before, that my grandmother is not able to go for a walk in August now. Why? Because it's too hot, not just because COVID, but climate change as well has an impact on her. So when she was a kid, she had to survive with her family during the Civil War. We had the Civil War. She passed the Civil War, she passed difficulties, and now at the end of her life, she's already 90 years old, she's now facing the effects of climate change, a part of COVID that is just on top of everything. And as well, we have many fires happening the same thing in summer in New Zealand or in Australia. The dramatic case of Australian wildfires last year was incredibly dramatic for the wildlife and the communities. So we need to take action on this. I'm just going to check the chat.
So just, yeah, it's good checking. I talked about the Australian, my friend's house burnt down in Australia, and I was there one day, and the next day I was back and the house had burnt down. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, and Arusa is mentioning the smoke that came to New Zealand. I remember, I think it was in Auckland, that the sky was orange. Was it? I remember, I think I took a picture, it was unbelievable. I couldn't believe. And then we have Olivia. Yeah, the drought in New Zealand is happening right now. We have issues in Auckland with the water management, asking people to not clean their car often, and other actions that we need to take to be able to have access to water. And unfortunately, if we don't take global action and action in New Zealand, it might happen more and more often. So thank you for all your comments. So now I'm going to talk about more focus on New Zealand. So by the end of the century, we might experience like higher temperatures, greater increases in the North Island and the South, with the greatest warming in the Northeast. The amount of warming in New Zealand is likely to be lower than the global average. You can see the news if we compare it to Siberia. Siberia must be frozen, and more times they are facing wildfires and not being able to control them because it's too big for Russian government to control it. Also, the rising of sea levels in New Zealand, they're going to experience it a lot in Tauranga and other areas, and it's going to have a huge impact on our communities. More frequent extreme weather events that we are currently facing it, but will be more common in the future, like the droughts that you, Olivia, mentioned, the floodings that we have experienced in different areas in the South and North Island, the change of rainfall patterns. So everybody is saying to me, well, I came to New Zealand 6 years ago, and everybody was saying to me that winter used to, so summer used to start earlier, and now it's starting more the summer a bit later. So the summer season is starting a bit later. So that is changing the weather and the seasonal during every year. And it's happening the same in Europe and Asia and Latin America. All around the world is changing the patterns and affecting our wildlife and our communities as well. And then I'm gonna hand it over to Maggie, that is gonna talk about the Pacific. Thank you.
Yeah, I love talking about the Pacific, but not when it comes to climate instability or climate change, because they're taking an awful hit, actually. They're the lowest contributors to climate pollution, but they're, you know, taking the brunt of it now. So we've got any number of Pacific Island nations whose islands have already disappeared under the waves. So we know that's Kiribati and PNG. Others are just holding on by their fingernails, literally. And Kiribati is also famous because the gentleman from Kiribati was the first to claim refugee status based on climate change. Now that failed, and it was rejected by New Zealand, because actually the Refugee Convention is you can only be a refugee if you have a well-founded fear of persecution. And so, of course, if your island is sinking under the ocean waves, that wouldn't be considered persecution. However, earlier this year, there was a decision from the United Nations highlighting that, so this wasn't a successful refugee claim, but actually New Zealand, if that case came before New Zealand now, there would be an obligation on the New Zealand government to address some of the concerns faced by people in Kiribati. So those concerns include not only the island sinking under the waves, but their inability to grow things, mainly because when they do grow, they are watering their plants with salt water, so they have no natural water reserves. They have seen an increase of cyclones, floods, and bad weather conditions that make their islands increasingly unsustainable. And they are in constant rebuild mode from cyclones and other damage visited upon them, all due to climate change related issues. I really do like that quote from the president of Palau. We no longer have flowers, we had to put them in a pot. And when there is high tide, we move it. Seems to be crazy that the world hasn't heard. And if we jump to the next slide, I think it's not only crazy, it's brutal when we know that our Pacific Island neighbours have been the best at shouting out for climate justice. On a world stage, they have demanded that the rest of the world listen, particularly when they are not contributors to global warming. They're amongst the lowest. The picture on the left, I don't know if you saw it in the media, but it was basically in Tuvalu, hosted the Pacific Island Forum. And Tuvalu got its kids to be sinking into water as a greeting for Pacific Island leaders who attended that meeting. The outcome of that meeting wasn't as good as they wanted, particularly because Scotty Morrison, who is the leader of Australia, didn't really want to give too much away at that meeting. But actually, one of the outcomes was the Kanaki Declaration, which for the first time actually identified climate change in the Pacific as a crisis. So it might seem very little, but actually it was recognised as a crisis that they are undergoing. I know we've hit you with a lot of bad news right now, but some of the positives coming out of the Pacific is the extent of the leadership that exists there. And more than any other issue, our Pacific Island leaders and neighbours feature centre stage when it comes to climate justice related issues. Not only that, our Pacific Island human rights defenders are world class and are attending COP22, are speaking to the United Nations, are pushing back against leaders like Scott Morrison from Australia when they don't recognise the climate change that they are contributing to. I think the other good thing about, and it's sadly due to their need to survive, that they have been very resolute about creating sustainable futures for themselves and developing systems, putting in place systems that will allow them to stay where they most want to be. And they just want to stay on their home, in their homes, on their islands. That's where they want to stay. Just like most refugees, they don't want to leave their home, they're forced to leave. Climate displaced people, they would much rather stay at home, but they have no choice. We're hoping that if we can build voices with this campaign, we'll keep adding to the call for change soon enough so that the Pacific can continue as it is right now. Could we jump to the next slide too, David?
Yep.
And I think that's you, isn't it? You're taking this bit?
Yeah, I can. So
was this me? No, this is me. Is it? This is me. You can see me.
You.
This is me. Thank you. This is something we test drove earlier. You can tell we're a seamless team, folks. Okay. This is where we talk about how climate change affects human rights, because actually most people know climate justice or climate change from an environmental point of view. But one of the reasons why we're talking about climate justice is it combines both the environmental and the human side of climate change, sorry, and it encourages people to be part of the campaign to push back. As you can see though, some of the key key rights that we talk about, and these are what we call economic, social, and cultural rights. So, the right to life, the right to food, the right to water, sanitation, and health, the right to good health. These are just basic human rights that are under all out assault if we don't push back on climate justice. So, can we go to the next slide?
Yep.
And again, leading the charge on pushing back against those abuses, we featured 4 Indigenous people, and deliberately so. You'll see that former Amnesty International Secretary General, he's from South Africa. We've got a Canadian there. We have an Indigenous woman, India, from New Zealand. And of course, we've got Brianna, who's going to be running one of our future workshops from the Pacific, from Samoa. And her islands took an awful hit following a cyclone. And she has been a climate justice warrior ever since. We are reliant on people like these, just 4 amazing people in front of you right now. They are human rights defenders. The thing about our human rights defenders and our environmental defenders is that today they are most likely to be at risk of harassment, persecution, ill treatment, torture, and death. So 40% of the human rights defenders who were killed last year, 40% of them were environmental or land rights human rights defenders. That's why we need to not only protect the laws and the environment, but we also need to make sure that the people speaking out for the environment are protected as well. And that's who these people are. They're all human rights defenders. Could I go to the next slide, David? We also wanted to talk a bit about those people who are particularly impacted by climate change. And for the most part, they are people like you and I. So most of the people on this call are women, and girls are women are more likely to be impacted by climate change than men. And even though they bear the brunt, they are not well represented in negotiating solutions. So why would they bear the brunt? Women do most of the work on the planet, fact, but actually they do most of the stuff certainly in developing countries, like gathering water. And they have to walk increasingly further distances to get water that is drinkable for their family. They look after their children and their communities, and they are more likely, particularly women who are mums, to get unwell. While they put lots of goodness into their kids, they will protect their kids, but that puts them at risk. So there is definitely a gender inequality to climate change. And what we are seeing throughout and it's one of the things we want to present in some of the workshops that we are running, the intersectionality of rights. So yes, we're talking about climate justice, but what we do know is that it has an impact on women's rights, and the same for rainbow rights. And David's going to talk about that a bit later. All those other rights are very much interconnected. Can we move on to the next slide? Thanks, David.
Yep, the next slide is mine. Thank you, Maggie. So we can see here several groups that are more impacted, more vulnerable to climate change effects. So Maggie has mentioned women, mentioned other groups. So if you want to know about the groups, specifically about Indigenous people, disabled, or rainbow, please join our future webinars that we are going to have during August. We are going to have one about Indigenous and disability rights on the 25th of August, and also one about rainbow rights 31st of August. We are going to provide you links with the list of all the webinars. So I'm not going to focus on these slides on Indigenous, disabled, or rainbow groups. I'm not an expert on this area, but we have experts for you to learn from. I'm going to talk about children, elderly people, and sick people. So children, what do you think about children? So they are not able, they don't have capacity to stand up by themselves. If they are alone, they are not able to, for example, if there is flooding, they don't have capacity to move to another area. They don't have most of the time economic capacity to do this, and they are most likely to get sick easily than adults. So they can be really impacted by the climate change effects, and it's one of the groups that most affected. And also we can think about the elderly people that as well can get sick really easily, can be most affected by heat waves, what I mentioned before. My grandmother, and maybe some of you have still your grandparents, and when there is a heat wave, they don't really want to leave their homes. They need to constantly be hydrated, drink water constantly, and they are suffering much more than adults between 15 to 60, you know. And then we talk about 6 people that already are suffering from their illnesses. And on top of that, they need to deal with all the climate change consequences. So imagine if someone needs assistance, they need cancer treatment, and in their country they are having constantly floodings and needs to move to another country where will not get free healthcare or funded healthcare, and they will need to face with economic issues and won't be able to find another treatment, and potentially can affect the health that is suffering already, not because climate change, but their own illnesses. So these 3 groups as well can be highly affected by climate change effects. And people living in low-income countries, they already have their healthcare systems, social systems, most of the times collapse. They don't have networks like in New Zealand or other countries, the more developed countries, that can support communities. So people who are living in low-income countries, they have been collapsed totally by COVID crisis. So imagine on top of that to have climate change effects and crisis. So yes, COVID-19 has been horrible, and it's continuing being really bad in these countries. But imagine on top of that to have climate change issues. So I'm just going to move to the next slide. So now it's time to talk about how we take action, how we can get involved in this campaign, because there is no planet B. Unfortunately not. If there is one, maybe who's up. Oh, you have been muted. 1 second.
Yep. Sorry, that's me being doofus.
Let me know.
David, I was just thinking before we move on, let's just see if there's any questions, because we've been kind of talking at you a fair bit. So any
if
questions,
you can put...
feel free to unmute yourself if you've got questions about what you've heard so far.
Thank you, Maggie, for reminding us. This, ask me questions. You have any, you can unmute. Aline, you want to make a question? If your mic doesn't work, you can add it on the chat. All good?
Cool. Great.
Cool, thank you. So, how do we take action? second, the next slide. So we have talked about the consequences that we are facing, but we really want to talk about how we can improve current situation. And honestly, together we can make an impact on this. If we keep together and we take action collectively, we are really, really powerful. So some of the good news is that you can read it here. More than 170,000 New Zealanders have participated in school strike for climate marches, have inspired a lot of youth and as well adults to take action and be more conscious on climate change effects on us, and sharing and learning from mobilization and community organizing. As well, 2010 will phase out ozone depleting chemicals like chlorofluorocarbons or CFCs that help restore the ozone layer. We are suffering from the ozone layer that's affecting New Zealand, but that allowed us to avoid 1 degree of warming. So we are working on that. We are on the road of trying to mitigate climate change effects. As well, you can see that some institutions, over 1,110 institutions with more than 11 trillion in assets under management, have committed to divest from fossil fuels. The last one in New Zealand, Kiwi Bank, so has divested their investment from fossil fuels. So it's one more step on this. And also the courts are increasingly funding in favor of climate justice, and more councils are declaring climate emergency and making more awareness of the issue, and the communities to be more aware of the climate consequences that we can face if we don't take action now. So what we want you to do. First thing, please learn about climate justice and human rights and raise awareness in your communities. Talk with your neighbor, talk with your auntie, talk with your colleagues at work, at high schools, at schools, if you are at uni as well. Talk with everyone about our campaign about climate justice. Have these conversations that are really important, not just in the street, but in your house. Make questions to yourself and try to answer them. Raise awareness. It's really important to talk about this issue. And also,
Dana, sorry, and David, can I just hold you there and just welcome Dana, who is just, is it Dana
hello.
or Dana? But anyway, you were very welcome. So
You're
thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Maggie. So also, we would love you to have you on our online and face-to-face webinars happening around New Zealand in this month related to climate justice with experts on different areas. They are run by youth, so the presenters are youth talking to youth, and it's really important. And they are really inspiring people that now later on in another slides I will comment on who is who and what they are presenting on. But also the recording of the webinars will be available for you. So then you can organize events like screening event where you live screen one of the webinars at your school or high school or uni, and then you can combine it with a fundraising event on site, asking for a gold coin donation, or a Q&A after watching the workshop to talk about the topic that they have been presenting or the skill that's shared with you. And be creative. You can organize other climate justice related events during Freedom Challenge Week, but also if you're not able to organize it, that it's in 1 week time, you're welcome to organize other Freedom Challenge events that you might have in mind to do with your friends, your classmates, anyone in your community later on at the end of August, before School Strike for Climate events on the 4th of September, or after that as well. But we will prefer during this month. I have a question in the chat, I think. Yeah, Liana mentioned this event. So
yeah.
You're welcome. There is on the 4th of September, it's going to be a national School Strike for Climate strike. So we don't have yet the details of how it's going to look like, but in most of the regions, they're going to strike for climate again. There are other School Strike for Climate regional groups that they have done other events, or they are planning to do different events. So we will keep you up to date. School Strike for Climate Dunedin hosted an event to talk, a panel discussion between them and other groups like the indigenous communities Manawhenua from the Dunedin area. So I heard that was pretty amazing, and other regional groups are thinking to do different things as well. So yes, watch this space and we'll keep you up to date.
And David, can I perhaps add too, last year during School Strike for Climate, or the week before, Amnesty International sent a letter to all principals asking that they neither punish nor prevent their students from attending School Strike for Climate events, because it was our young people's human rights to peaceful protest, and that should be respected. It was our young people's right to freedom of expression, and that should be respected. So we spoke out strongly and put out a media release to support that. We will again be doing that this year. So please know that we've got your back if you are facing pushback from your schools about attending those events. We're very keen to ensure that you can get out there and do what you do so well, which is protest.
Thank you, Maggie. Yeah, we are working on that as well. So your rights to protest and freedom of expression comes first. Oh, sorry.
So Olivia's asked a question.
Yeah.
So the question was, should we also try and talk to our principals ourselves if we want to attend? Yes. The way Amnesty International operates effectively is to talk to the decision makers first and say, hey guys, this is what we'd like to do. So total transparency, this is what we'd like to achieve together. Will you come out? Will you allow us to do this? And then to negotiate a position from that point of view. So I think it's really good to be transparent. And what we will do is make sure that any letter that we write is on the website, so you can draw on that, because it comes from a rights-based perspective. So it will be a resource that's something you can use in presenting to principals. What we do know, we had a lovely meeting with School Strike for Climate organisers perhaps a month ago now, and Molly from Christchurch said that the principal at her school still didn't agree to allowing her to go out and attend School Strike for Climate, but because Amnesty International had spoken out, her parents did. So that at least was a win on that front.
Cool, thank you. And then we have here the list of our webinars, and we have one that needs to be confirmed with Brianna Frean, that is the C50 Pacific Climate Warriors leader, that she has collaborated with us last year in our Ambassador of Conscience Award, where we awarded youth climate justice organizations, Terra Fatu Climate, Pacific Climate Warriors and Terra Fatu. And she also has participated in our climate panel 2 months ago for the Humanity Appeal. And we are still need to confirm with her. She probably will present on human rights impact on Pacific people due to climate change, but also how to work together in solidarity between groups. So the first webinar in person, if you're able to make it in Kapiti cost, or if not, you can join on Zoom, is the one that is organized by us with Sophie Hanford, School Strike for Climate, and also she's in the Kapiti Coast District Council, and she's gonna present on how you can organize a team of climate justice advocates and take action together. She has been amazing organizing last year's School Strike for Climate Wellington group, and also coordinating with other leaders around New Zealand. to make effective climate action during the strikes. And the next one is going to be on the 20th of August, that you can attend in person as well if you are in Dunedin, or you can join online. That is going to be with Jen Cotman, that she is from Generation Zero, and she has been really involved on several campaigns, including the Zero Carbon Act with Generation Zero, and she is an expert on how to engage at regional, local, and national level in advocacy, and is going to talk about the civic participation in Aotearoa's environmental sphere in these 3 levels. It's going to be pretty amazing. We're really excited to have all of them with us. And the next one is on the 25th of August, 5:30. That is going to be online, and it's going to be facilitated by Kira Sherwood Oregon. She is the Indigenous and Disability Rights Advocate from Activate Agency, but also she has been part of several COPs, the climate COPs in the last years, and representing organizations including Terra Hatu. And she's going to present online. So if you are free on that day, please join on Zoom. And if you're not, the recording is going to be available for your groups as well. And the last one that I'm going to mention is on the 31st of August, that is going to be on Zoom as well. And the facilitators are Tane and Charm, that they are LGBTIQ+ activists. And they're going to present on rainbow rights and climate justice. And if you are able, please pop on Zoom. They are amazing rainbow advocates with a lot of experience on how to take action, and they will let you know how connects rainbow rights with climate justice together. And so, these are the experts. Schedule and locations now are 100% confirmed. So you can see at the bottom of these slides that might change, but if changes, please, first thing you need to do is register for every webinar you want to attend, and then if there are any changes, you will receive notifications from us. But first, please, register on Eventbrite, share the event with your networks, because maybe some in your community, in your area, in your school might want to join. And there are different topics, different skills that you can learn, and then share your ideas and what you might have questions for them, so you can pop questions as well on the chat while you're on Zoom or in person. And now I'm going to hand it to Maggie to know more about what can we do.
And just checking that you can hear me now, because I've changed where the office I was in and my microphone.
We can hear you, yeah.
There you go. And the one thing that I want you guys to know, because David's spoken about those webinars, is that my aim and our aim was to remove people my age from the platform. Our aim with those youth advocates is to ensure that it's youth, talking to youth, upskilling youth, basically. So this is the only time you're going to be seeing my face fronting for Freedom Challenge, and that's exactly what we wanted to do. I was having a conversation today with somebody, and I said the only thing I contributed to the planet between the ages of 13 and 21 was I blushed. I was really shy, and I wasn't a great activist. What I know is when I'm talking to Molly down in Christchurch, or when I'm talking to Kira or Sophie, is that they are extraordinarily talented, and more talented than I was at that age, and probably am now. So I just wanted to share that with you. Basically, we're giving you the best youth talent that we can find. It's world class. So please do make the most of it and go along for the ride. As to what you can do, yeah, we'd love you to get informed. And this is part of what this workshop is all about. And on the Resource Hub, there's also the Freedom Challenge pack, including this document, which is an action circular, which highlights pretty much everything that we would like you to do. And it also, as part of the pack, there's a resource page to allow you to access our downloadable resources, both audio, visual, and reports. So please do get informed, because with that you're actually dangerous when you're talking to decision makers, because they can't pull a fast one over you. Then with that, we would encourage you to ignite action, and we've already spoken about some of those actions, whether it is attending School Strike for Climate, but also if, for instance, you can't attend a School Strike for Climate, it falls on the wrong day, your school doesn't allow it, or whatever, then organise your own events, and they can be everything from rescreening the webinars, but actually having debates on climate justice, having movie screenings. And I'm open to some possibilities from you guys about whether you've done any thinking about some of the events that you might like to host. If there's some that you've got in mind.
You can unmute yourself if you want to share some ideas, or you can ask questions as well.
Or put it in the chat, actually, whichever you prefer. We take it always.
We haven't thought of any events yet, but we thought that we would probably combine with the sustainability group so we can work things out together when we do Freedom Week.
Yeah, great idea. And we know already that environmental groups, School Strike for Climate, sustainability groups, encourage them to come along for the ride. Just like you, they'll be looking for people to support them. And this is a campaign on which we definitely can ask for their support, and they are very likely to want to come along for the ride. While we haven't nailed it, we are talking to people who made a great movie or documentary called High Tide, No Hide. It was a documentary about last year's leaders of School Strike for Climate. And we know that that is due for release in October, allegedly, if they can pull off another miracle there. That could be a resource that you can draw on for those events that you might like to host. But you might also have people within your communities who just like Brianna, have experienced dreadful impact of climate justice and might be willing to present on those issues to your school or your class. But are there any other ideas? And again, feel free to unmute or put into the chat line.
I just also wanted to mention that sometimes if you are at the university in your area, there are other clubs that might be interested on this campaign. When I was at All Week with Arusa at Auckland Uni, I had a chat with Gen Zero. They were there, the uni group, and they were glad that I let them know that we were running a webinar with Jen from Gen Zero, Dunedin. Feel free to pass this information to other climate groups, and they might be able to join and as well and share their thoughts and support you on your events. So yeah.
Okay. Another idea that I had, I didn't have, a school had. They have a school pool. They were planning to do in their school pool, they were going to put boards that people could walk on, but the boards would be sinking underwater. So it was going to be like a challenge to get across the pool, and just to highlight, and each board would be a Pacific nation or a pretend nation. And so they could give people a sense of the actual impact. So the key thing to do when you're having action, and I know it's a tough topic, but actually have fun. Feel free to have fun when you want to highlight the issues that we need to see change occur on, actually, because you're more likely to win friends and raise awareness. And it's pretty much getting visible is key to that, which is why this year we have also provided you with, or we are providing you, and some of you have already ordered it, but 2 new resources in addition to the badges that we regularly send out. The first one is the bumper sticker or a sticker that you can put anywhere you like. Climate justice equals human rights. So we want to get that message out there, because particularly people of an older generation don't seem to have caught on to that fact right now. We've also got the Our Planet, Our Rights pocket guide, and that opens up into this kind of okay but not great poster. More importantly, on the back, lots of facts and figures for you to draw on. And it's a great resource for you to get a donation on in return, handing out to people, or just hand it out to people. Because why? We want to raise awareness. We want people to know what the issues are. This is also an opportunity for you to recruit to your own groups. And you're going to help us recruit to Amnesty International by encouraging people to join our webinars. Just like you, everybody who registers, just so you know, we've got your contact details. Thanks very much. You've given us your name, your email address. Sometimes you've even given us your phone number. So truly, there is no escape. What do we plan to do with that? We're going to encourage people to come along and join Amnesty Community, to become an advocate, to keep taking action with us. And of course, we always offer people that great human right to say no to us as well. But if we've got your contact details, then we will be contacting you and all the people that you get on board to those webinars. So if that includes your parents, great, because those webinars are not just for youth, they're youth talking to anybody who wants to be talked to, and even some who don't, but need to be talked to. That could be your parents, it could be your grandparents, it could be decision makers. Just let them know about it and encourage them to come along. Once we have those contact details, we're very happy to say hi to people. So you don't even have to, because we're going to do that for you.
Also, I wanted to mention, Maggie, that in line of what you said of having fun, and what I heard from other groups, including uni group at Wellington, was to have fun with events. And one of the good events that really work and people have fun is a quiz night. So you can organize a quiz night related to climate justice and climate change effects, and you educate them while they are doing the quiz, and you're having fun. And also you can raise funds for us, all in one event as well. And some people might combine it with first screening part of a workshop, or maybe some clips of our resources. So yeah, just be creative and have fun.
And if you can do music, we know the Vic University group regularly hosts a Freedom Challenge concert. They're considering the potential of only having weather-related songs. So that could be a great way to attract attention and have a point of difference. So those kind of ideas out there. Before moving on to the last few slides, can I just check in again? Any other questions or any other ideas that you've thought of as we've been talking to you? Okay. No? Well, I'll move on to that next slide then, if that's okay. Thanks, David.
Social media.
Ooh, yeah. So, my favorite. For the first time, well, we've been on social media for a good long while. We, Amnesty, we'd like you to be on social media as well. So, we are on Instagram, we are on Facebook, and this, for the first time ever, we are on TikTok, except Amnesty New Zealand isn't on TikTok. If you want to be on TikTok globally, and we would really encourage you to be, then that is the Amnesty TikTok account. And they are committed to running your, whatever you want to put on their TikTok channel. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. But we do welcome more posts than we are seeing from our youth advocates on our social media feeds. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Next slide. Thanks, David. Okay.
The TikTok account. So how it works is you can tag us on other platforms or send us the videos to info@amnesty.org.nz or email us or share it on Dropbox or any platforms, and then we are going to forward your videos to the global account on TikTok, and then they will see if they are going to be able to share it globally. And then the last one is Amnesty Community, Maggie.
Amnesty Community Facebook page. This is a Facebook page that is your Facebook page for you to put your comments, your bragging rights, and we fantastic to see those posts from you, Arusa, about your last O week. Really awesome to see that. Seen some great posts from our school groups on Black Lives Matter. What you guys need to know is when you post on Amnesty Community Facebook page, you were talking to a community of about 600 people just like you, just like me, just like David. Teacher coordinators, student coordinators, a whole community that learn from each other. So because Maclean's sparked the Black Lives Matter taking the knee action, other schools followed suit, and one teacher, Shona McRae from Westlake Girls, is organising all 400 students of the Amnesty International group to take a knee. That was sparked by a youth advocate telling us what they were up to on Amnesty Community Facebook page. So please do post on that as your portal. Post questions, you've got bragging rights there too. And if you do pose a question, then you know, a lot of people answer. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's staff, but often it's advocates, because it's our place to share the knowledge and share the learning. So please, love to up the number of posts from advocates on that Facebook group. And that, I think we move now, my darlings, to the final slide. Back to you. Any other questions? And feel free to unmute yourself or whatever, or send them by chat. Cool. Okay, well, I like it that even though we started fashionably late, 15:15, we're finishing even more fashionably early at 5:30, is it? No, 6:30.
6:30, yeah.
Yeah, so pretty damn good. Thank you. Thank you for hanging in with us. That's a lot of information.
There is a question from Yuko. Thank you. So I'm going to answer it live.
Please.
Thank you, Eliana, for your cheers. Thank you. So Yuko, the reason that it's around 5 to 7 p.m. is because we think that it's the time that most people can make it. Some of the webinars are at 5, others 5:30, others at 6, but more or less on this time frame, because people at school or high school or uni groups, or people that are working, finish work or school around 3, 4, or 5, and then they are ready to jump on the call or to attend at the venue. So if we do it earlier or later, maybe people are too busy and they are not able to join our events.
Yeah.
Did I answer? Is there another question?
While David, what I will add is that's why we're recording all the sessions, because even if you can't make it, then you can actually do a rescreening. And just to add to David's answer, when we went out and sought feedback on this, people did say their preference was from 5 to 7 time frame. If that doesn't work for you, however, at the end of this, not this session, but at the end of Freedom Challenge, we are sending out a review sheet. We want your feedback. If this is a crap time, then let us know, because we will make it at a time that suits you. Thanks, Yuko. Any other questions before we say sayonara or goodbye?
I have one.
Thanks, Larissa.
So you guys were presenting from a presentation, and I was just wondering, will we get a copy of the presentation? Because I might incorporate that with one of our events, like take some information from the slides.
Yeah.
We can provide.
So, so all the things that we have are downloadable and available on the Resource Hub, including this PowerPoint. So that includes a downloadable copy of our Planet, Our Rights, a link of all the resources with audio visual material that Amnesty commenting on climate justice, but also links to some really gorgeous young people speaking out on climate justice. The previous webinar that David mentioned right at the very beginning on In Conversation with those 3 world-class youth climate justice advocates who just happened to come from New Zealand and the Pacific. Yeah, so it's all there, and you can where you'll find it.
I'm just going to share the link from our Resource Hub with all the links and documents and with all the information, and it's on the chat.
Thanks, David.
Hello, Dana. Thank you for joining.
Okay. And any other questions then before we let you go?
Just to note that, Dana, if you weren't on the call for the whole session, this session will be available for you, or if you have any questions, let us know about Freedom Challenge. You can contact us as well. She's Dana from Hillcrest.
Hillcrest High in Hamilton. Yep, Dana, lovely to meet you. Yeah, Hillcrest is one of our great Amnesty school groups, so thank you.
And also I saw that Suha joined the call. Thank you so much for joining the call, Suha, as well.
Okay, so last chance to raise your questions. Otherwise, my darlings, I think we are done as a done thing. Oh, hi. Is there a specific way you would recommend advertising? Okay, I'll start. That's a question that I'll answer live. So it is, yeah, advertising, I would certainly say get out, spread our bumper stickers around, splatter these brochures which open up into a poster far and wide. Social media on your, and perhaps I should ask is, are you coming from a school or a university, Suha, or are you an individual? Excellent, you're from Hillcrest as well. That's fantastic. Yes, so in and around school groups then, if there's school notices, or actually, it's so old-fashioned, but it packs a punch as much as it did back in the day, chalking around the school about Freedom Challenge, or within the Freedom Challenge kit, there's some really useful facts, highlighting some facts and figures that you could just pop around the school, and including, what's a good one? 97% of climate scientists conclude that the rapid heating of the planet is mostly man-made. Now that's less important here in New Zealand because we trust the science and we trust the experts. But for the American market, 97% of climate scientists believe that rapid heating of the planet is mostly man-made is huge. Draw on those facts and figures. You could have quiz nights in part of your advertising. Does anybody else have any other suggestions for advertising? Social media is certainly one of them.
Yeah, on social media that Maggie mentioned as well, if you have Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, tagging us allows us to repost, reshare your content that you're promoting. And honestly, it works much better to engage people on something that is posted on social media by a person rather than an organization sometimes, because the people see you, an individual, taking action. and it's more powerful, and people would like to join you rather than an organization that sometimes they don't see us behind that on our profiles on social media. So please share your content with your social media, with your communities, tag us, we can reshare it with our broader audience and then reach more people. And it's really powerful to see one uni student sharing this, and they will see a leader leading on the campaign, and you might get questions from people that would like to get engaged on the campaign, and then you will be able to get more supporters on board. Thank you, Suha.
Okay. Okay.
Sweet, Maggie. Thank you so much for joining. Is there anything you want to add, Maggie?
No, but my thanks for sitting in with us. Looking forward to seeing what you pull off in your schools and universities, and get back to us. We're here to help.
If everybody has registered on Eventbrite, you will receive a follow-up email with details regarding the campaign. And if you have any questions, feel free to answer this email, and we will get back to you as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. So Maggie, I'm just going to stop recording and see if I can download it. You the same, eh?
I think I've stopped recording also.